Okay, now that we know what a grid is, let's talk about how we might use a grid in publications. So, the first thing we want to do is think about the kind of grid. And again, as we discussed in the previous video, we talked about how complex a grid might be based on your content. So, the first kind of grid that you might use in a publication is the two-column grid. Pretty common, used in books and newsletters. It's also pretty common when you've got a narrow publication and the column width is limited. The layout is very simple, but still offers a little bit of variety. Not awesome, but it helps. Images and headlines can span both columns on the page. This is what a two-column grid might look like, right? Not too exciting. And this is what it might look like when you actually use it. So you've seen this a lot in different kinds of publications, and it does the job. Not awesome, but it does the job. So the next thing you might think about, and this is a little bit more fun, is that if you're doing a coffee table book or something like that, a two-column wide grid, and that has it can be kind of more fun because it has a little bit more of a sense of elegance, and it has, again, about the same amount of flexibility, and a lot of what you might do for this might be using a slightly larger a slightly larger font size, so that it doesn't, the line lengths aren't too long. Okay, so this depends a lot upon your font size and your lettering. And this is what that two-column wide grid might look like. And this is how it might look when you actually laid something out on it. So again, it probably works best when you have a couple of really large images and a limited amount of text. Three-column grids we see a lot. Obviously, they offer more flexibility. The text and images can span one or all of the columns. It works for a lot of layouts, even wide ones. And it's again suited for publications that aren't real complex. And this is what a three-column grid would look like. And this is how you might use a three-column grid. Again, you see these a lot in magazines, pretty common there. Four or more column grids, this is where I'm going to suggest you guys go for this project. Something a little bit more complex. It's good for placing a wide variety of elements. It offers a lot of flexibility. It works for almost all kinds of layouts, even wide ones. And I'm going to suggest you use a square for this project because it's kind of a neat format, especially for the kind of brochure we're designing. But it's still a situation where you might, I would encourage you to explore this. Grids with uneven numbers of columns work best, and the reason why is uneven is a little less balanced, and very often it creates a little bit more of a dynamic layout. 5 and 7 column grids are really fun to work with, and they also allow for asymmetrical placements of your elements. So this is what a 7-column grid might look like. Now remember that you can be spanning one or more of those columns. You don't have to be limited to the narrow areas, but by the same token, you can, right? So you can have little captions and stuff in there. So, the columns can be 2 across and then 1 off. So the 5 or 7 column grid has a lot of potential, and I encourage you to try something like this in your project because it gives you a lot of opportunities for some pretty fun things. Here's another example of how that can be used. And again, it offers neat opportunities for captions, call outs, pull quotes, all kinds of neat stuff. So that's something that you can really use to your advantage on this project as well. You can think about doing bleeds and other neat things. Okay, an asymmetrical grid is something that you just run a lot of columns on, and then you could just do pretty much whatever you want with it. And so they're kind of fun because they're almost like a 7-column grid, only not quite the same. And so here's how you might use an asymmetrical grid. Again, thinking about maybe using bleeds, The odd column can have pull quotes or call outs. Lots of possibilities there. You can use graphic elements to isolate the text. Initial caps are always fun things to do. So these are some things that I would encourage you to explore as you work with your layouts. As well, because we are dealing with elements that have, in some ways, a limited amount of text, a couple of paragraphs here, a caption there, some imagery. You might also consider what we were talking about in the previous video by adding some rows. And so the rows will help you to organize the structure vertically, not just horizontally. And it also provides opportunities for the flow lines. And remember, we talked about flow lines in the last video. So that's something that you might also consider doing when you start to lay out your grid. So try a multi-column grid like this. Work with some horizontal rows to help you break up your space and have some fun with it. So that's essentially how you could use a grid to design your project. And notice here, these layouts aren't in 8.5 by 11. They're at kind of an off size. And I would encourage you to explore off sizes. 8.5 by 11, we've been there, done that. And it's just kind of average. This is your opportunity to kind of explore something a little bit more creative. And so I encourage you to do that. All right, have some fun.